I just think you need to be yourself and not be worrying about what other people think, because generally they're not even thinking about you. So there's that. I think we worry a little bit too much about what people think. We're afraid to fail. Like I told you, I failed in 2017, and it was absolutely, it's terrible, because I was like, oh my goodness, all this work that I've done. I have this pharmacist brain. I've got these great formulas, but I don't know how to bring it to market, or it's not going to work out, or I'm going to lose my house in the first week. Do you know that kind of way? I think being true to yourself, I think that understanding that there's room for everyone at the table. I think sometimes we think that we have to gatekeep, and we have to keep it, we can't possibly tell another founder of a supplement business that this is the way we do it because they are going to copy us. But everyone's different, and your audience will relate to you.
Laura Dowling, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Could we start with fabU and the supplement business? You do so much, and it was hard actually to know where to start, but I just want to start with the supplement business. If you could tell me a little bit about it, what
Sure.
you do, what the whole premise is,
I'm
and the kind of vision.
disappointed that you didn't want to start with like women's bits. But anyway,
It's there. We're going to deal with it.
we'll move in there slowly. So what you want to know why I started the supplement
Well,
business?
no, just a little bit about the supplement
yeah.
business, what it is, what the supplements are, that
okay.
kind of thing.
So I have a range of supplements. They're primarily based on functional edible mushrooms combined with vitamins and minerals, and they are formulated by me, developed by me over 12 years of pain, torture. And they're stocked in over 1,500 pharmacies and health food stores across Ireland. We've a great online business too, and then we're also trying to make our way into the UK. So that is the business today as it stands.
Can you give me an idea, and we can, if you're not comfortable talking about this, we can cut it out or whatever. But what kind of size is the business today, and when did you start it?
So I started the business back in 2022, the June Bank Holiday weekend. I launched it. But it had been about 12 years of R&D prior to that to get it to the stage where I launched it. I launched it online from my couch on my stories on Instagram. At that stage, I had no retail buyers interest in it. I had phoned some pharmacy buyers up to see if they were interested, and they all said it's a bit of a saturated space. Plus, mushrooms, like who uses supplements that have mushrooms in them. They're not really a thing here in Ireland yet. But I knew these things were brilliant because I had studied pharmacognosy as part of my pharmacy degree, obviously in Trinity. And I'd also been to India a number of times, fallen in love with Ayurvedic medicine and how they practice medicine over there, which is basically you go to the doctor will give you a 2-hour consultation, he'll or she will, ask you about your diet, your sleep, your exercise, your stress, what your life is like, and then prescribe you foods and mushrooms and botanicals and tinctures to go about your day. So it's really this preventative health space. And then when I came out of, so I'd done that in pharmacy when I was in pharmacy school, and then I also continued to travel to India. And then subsequently to learn about traditional Chinese medicine as well, because it's all kind of under this one umbrella of this ancient Eastern wisdom. And then when I was working in pharmacy, people were coming in, and it's not really a healthcare system, it's a sick care system. People get sick, they go to the doctor, they get a prescription, they get medicines, they hopefully get better. But a lot of people are have chronic illnesses and they're on long-term medications. And I was very much into this preventative health space. I'd grown up with a mother who was always about food, is about health and nutrition. There was never the word diet in her house, never a weighing scales. Mum was always exercising, even though she worked full-time and was a midwife. And I just grew up in that space. I had that kind of mindedness. And then when I was in pharmacy, I got very disillusioned that I was literally just giving out drug after drug. And look, drugs are brilliant and they save lives and they're absolutely necessary. And vaccines in particular are fantastic. Obviously, our health, and we live so long because vaccines have prevented so much death in the world as well. However, the preventative health thing was just like no one was really talking about it. And I could see this wave coming from America. They're kind of on the ball about that, a number of years ago. But also when I was a very young pharmacist, women were coming into my pharmacy and they were ready to crack up. They wanted to choke their husband for just munching cornflakes in the same room as them or breathing in the same room as them. And we weren't talking about menopause back then. HRT prescribing had fallen off a cliff after the WHI study linked HRT to breast cancer, erroneously so. That has now been debunked. However, there's still there's still this lingering worry about HRT and breast cancer, unfortunately. So I had all these women and I had nothing to give them. And they weren't being prescribed HRT. So I knew because of the studies that I'd done in traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurvedic medicine that mushroom supplements, that botanicals could really help them. So I used to send them around to the health food store with a list as long as my arm, and they'd be coming in with bags of stuff. And that's really where I got the idea, Jesus, I could actually formulate these things myself. So that's where the business started. So currently we are, as I said, we're in 1,500 pharmacies and health food stores. We have a great online business. I think maybe by June of last year, that's 2005, we'd had sold 1 million units to date up till then. So I don't know what size of business that means I am, but I think it means that I'm quite successful. However, Ireland is a small market. So I would love to be successful in the UK, even if it was just 1 or 2 of my products. I currently have 10 in the range, plus actually my intimate health range too, which is another 2, plus my book. But so that's where I'd like to go to with it.
You were recently on the Tommy Tiernan show, and I watched it in preparation for this. And it's a more general audience, of course, right? But you introduced yourself as a women's health advocate. And I was wondering, because you spent 17 years working as a pharmacist in a pharmacy, do you consider yourself now to be an entrepreneur, or at the time were you kind of always thinking, I mean, you said there you were formulating it for 12 years. Were you always thinking, I'm going to start my own business at that stage?
So I actually worked in pharmacy for over 20 years, but 17 years in the one pharmacy close to my home. So I always loved speaking with patients in the pharmacy and customers. That was how I enjoyed my work, and I loved learning from them. So I was getting this day-to-day feedback about women's health, men's health too, to a certain extent, but women in particular was very much of an interest of mine. And I just understood that they didn't understand their bodies and that they needed more education about it and they wanted to learn. So it kind of happened really organically. And I didn't really see myself as an entrepreneur, although my husband had said to me, "Jesus, Laura, you should start a business. Like, look how, interested people are when you kind of talk to them about, say, eating well and exercise." And I think one time we'd gone down to a B&B down the country. He was doing the tour of Bern or something like that. And there was an older lady there running the Airbnb or the B&B at the time. And I don't know, I got talking to her about like exercise and strength training for older women. And she was just fascinated. And he was like, see, like, I mean, and I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, what should I do? And at the time I was having babies as well and breastfeeding, Jesus, like, I mean, get those lads off those tits was something hard. I had 3 boys. So it never really occurred to me until, but I did think I could make something here, and I was tinkering around with formulations for ages, and then Instagram kind of happened really organically as well. I've been tipping away at it, but not really with any kind of plan, just putting up the random posts here and there, and it was just written posts with a picture, which is really boring. You can't get your personality across. But then I discovered stories on Instagram, which was just kind of before COVID. So I started to talk in the dispensary about drugs and about medicines and about health just before COVID, and then COVID hit, and the women that were coming into me in the pharmacy for their intimate care advice, for their menopausal advice, for their the world is falling down around me advice couldn't get in, because obviously we weren't encouraging people to come into the pharmacy because of COVID. So I just started uploading more videos online, and then women were just sharing that. So my Instagram kind of exploded in and around the time, about 2 years before I brought my products to market. But I tried to bring them to market in 2017 and it didn't work out at all because I had no business sense. So I then tried again, but it worked out for the better because I then had a little audience. So it was easy to kind of, I suppose, launch and get the first interest in it and the first sales. And that drove people into the pharmacies asking for it, and the pharmacies weren't stocking it because they'd all said no. But then I was getting messages on Instagram from pharmacists going, where can we stock this? Where can we stock this? or sorry, where can we get this? And I phoned my distributor, who's been my distributor since, Whole Foods wholesaler in Ballymount, and I said, listen, I have this, and do you think you might want to stock it? They're like, come over, and we had a gentleman's handshake, as they call it, and we've been in business since, and got into retail quickly as a result of, I suppose, my platform, which was brilliant because it probably couldn't have happened in 2017 as quickly.
When I look at all the things you're doing now, so if you take you're an author of Love Your Vulva, an excellent book, which I have not read it cover to cover, but I've certainly read parts of it.
It's a dip in and out kind of book as well, you know?
Yeah, it is. And some of it is not very relevant to me, but some of it is, I suppose. So it was great to get the information. But you've got the book, you've got your live show, you've got the supplement company, and
I'm fucking exhausted.
Well, I was later on, right, going to ask you about your kind of your day to day and what does it look like, because there's so much going on there. But when I compare all the kind of really creative stuff you're doing now, at the very least, what you were doing prior to this, it wasn't. I just feel like you must not have been expressing some part of yourself that was always there potentially. And I just kind of want to hear from did you feel that at any stage along the journey?
So I always loved showwomanship, say, like I was always, in school, the lead in the drama. I loved dancing. I tinkered with Billy Barry's there for a while between 12 and 14, and I loved dancing. I was never very good at it, and I fancied myself as a singer, but I'm tone deaf. But I loved acting. I just loved expressing myself in that way. I suppose I was a bit of a stage school girl as such. Without really actually having any formal education in it. I actually did fancy being an actress when I was in my teenage years, but my dad and mum, they were like, Laura, you're great at maths and chemistry, which I was. I was naturally good at them, and they said, look, you should be a pharmacist, because they knew I loved healthcare, but I didn't really want to do I didn't want to do medicine because I thought I'd have to be cutting up bodies and stuff like that in college, and I'm allergic to blood and guts. Although I do love a good abscess. I'd have no problem draining an abscess, but I just couldn't, blood I'm not really into, as in so yeah. So I wanted to get into the healthcare space, and pharmacy seemed to be a good route to do that. And then you do your pharmacy degree and you come out and you immediately step into a very well paid job. Well, back then you did anyway. So at the age of 23, I was in a very well paid job for a 23-year-old. So yeah, so I suppose I put that to bed, and then my job, I suppose, day to day wasn't, it wasn't that it wasn't fulfilling me, but maybe it wasn't giving me the excitement that, say, that what I'm doing now is. However, I did really enjoy talking to people every day. I enjoyed learning from them and understanding what made people tick and what they needed in terms of their healthcare. And then I had babies. So, at the age of 28, I had my first boy, and then I had one every year for one every second year then until I was 33. And, was kind of, I suppose, obsessed with my little babies at that time. So that was a good, 8 to 10 years of raising little boys, which I very much loved doing, as well as working full time in the pharmacy. Well, actually, I worked a 4-day week once my first boy came along, and then I was my brain has always been a very busy brain. I've subsequently got diagnosed with ADHD. I'm sure a lot of entrepreneurs that come on here probably have a smidgen of it. But I now realise that my brain has always been really busy, and I've always been needing to do something else. So when I was working in the pharmacy and researching the formulations, and then also raising the little boys, that was probably as much as I could have done back then. But then once it's all kind of happened really at the right time. It's very strange but I do remember one morning, it was back in maybe 2016, 2015, I was actually working on the design of my brand. So we'd come up with the fabU brand logo with a couple of girls that were just, I'd hired. They were a copywriter and a designer. And I remember going out one Sunday to a hotel across the north side to meet them so they could show me what they had come up with. And I remember one of the boys, my youngest, was he was small, he was putting his arms around my legs and stuff. So I still had that kind of pull of, I was trying to do something, but I was also trying to be there for the kids. So God, that was a long-winded way of saying, yes, maybe I've always been busy and doing something. My brain always needs to be active, probably to my detriment sometimes, because then I just like would fall into bed exhausted sometimes. But once the kids were, I suppose, at 10, 11, the youngest was 10, 11, it was really my chance then to, I suppose, take the foot off the mothering gas and go hell for leather with the business, which is, but it's all happened so organically. I haven't really had a chance to kind of step back and think about it, to be honest with you. That's the first time anyone's asked me that question. But it's a very interesting question.
It's well, your answer was very interesting. You said you had ADHD, and when I was, I'm 30, nearly 38, so I was 34.
Oh, you look very young.
Thank you
Are
very
you? My
much,
skin,
Laura.
hair, nails glow.
So,
I think
yes,
you might be.
it was a good advertiser, good plug. But when I was 34, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and for me, that was a real moment of confidence for me, because there were always things that I didn't realize why I couldn't really do it when everyone else seemed to have no problem with sort of various things. And I was like, wow, like, yes, I now know why. And it's been great for me subsequently. Was it the same for you when you found out?
So I found out only a couple of years ago. So I was in my like early 40s when I found out. And it just made a lot of things fall into place for me and made a lot of sense to me. So as a woman with ADHD, we present differently to men and boys, women and girls. We tend to mask a lot, and it's not as noticeable. So where you have boys like running around the classroom, getting up to hijinks, girls tend to just, they have an inner voice inside their head, but they can still work away, or some may not be able to. But I always performed very well in school. So I remember when I got the diagnosis and I told my mum, she was like, I never knew. Oh my God. And she almost felt like she'd done me a disservice not knowing. I was like, but Mum, like, how were you to know? Like, ADHD is only something that's really come to light in recent years, particularly in Ireland. So yeah, I definitely feel it has made me understand my brain more and what my limitations are and what my strengths are. And as a result, even within my business, I'm able to pinpoint who I need to do a job that I'm really shite at. And I'm shite at a lot of things. But then you excel in other areas too. And, you know, it's also, so my husband and I are together since I was 18. I took him to the devs. Isn't that very romantic?
It is.
I haven't managed to shake him off since. But it's made him understand me more too, because I used to drive him crazy, because talk about disorganized. You know, the utility room is a constant mess. And he would be very methodical and wanting things in order. And it doesn't matter how many times I tidy that fucking utility room. 2 days later, it's a mess again. Not dirty, just fucking things fucked everywhere. And now he totally understands. So that's just the way I roll, and he's happy with it, you know. So I think that, yeah, it's made me understand myself more. It's made me probably go a little bit easier on myself. And now I understand why I'm always doing. Like, even to pin me down to get this podcast done, it was tough. And I know that. And it's always because my calendar, I tend to just book it. But now I'm getting better at saying no to things and saying, listen, I can't do this actually. Because I used to just front load my calendar so much that I wouldn't, I'd take on, say, maybe doing a talk down the country on a Monday, not realising, and not looking back at my calendar and realising I've been working 7 days straight the week before, and then now I have to go into Limerick in the car at 9 o'clock on a Monday because I said I'd do something for someone. So I'm getting much better at that. I'm getting much better at writing lists. I use a lot of these apps now. Like, are you familiar with Trello?
Yes.
Oh, I love Trello. I love it. So I have my to-do list that I tick off, because I used to have this. Didn't you hear me phone one of the girls in my office just
Yes.
before I came, or I voice note her and said, "Will you get me a copybook?" And that's so, like, I've asked her to get me a copybook, and actually I don't know why now, because I'm going to lose that copybook, because like I have 10 copybooks that I've written shit down in, and they're all over the house, so I can't. But if you have like the Trello board on your laptop, at least everything is always there. I introduced Slack into my workplace because I just could not follow emails. I'm really bad with emails. So if someone emails me, I just like go, oh, I'll look at that later, and then I forget. So I'm sure there's people out there, they're like, I've been trying to get in contact with Laura for ages and she's fucking rude because she never gets back to me. And it's literally because an email comes in and I'm like, oh, I'll look at that again. And then I just forget about it. And then more emails come in and I just can't work my way down them. So I understand myself a lot more now, and I'm a bit easier on myself. And I have learned that. So I always exercised and moved and loved that. And now I know why, because that was where I was getting my dopamine hit from. And I would find that during very busy periods in my work, which I've had many in the last 3.5 years, during weeks where I wasn't able to get to the gym or do any workout, my mood would drop considerably. So now I make a huge effort to like, actually, it's really important for me, and it's not selfish. It's important for me because I'm a much better mother, wife, business person, pharmacist. I can show up for everyone if I get that little hour to myself in the morning time. So I try and do that about 5 times a week.
Yeah, it's interesting even when you said you almost excuse yourself there. It's like it is for me, but it's not selfish. And I think that well, it feeds back a little bit to something I was reading about in the book and that
Oh
I've
yeah.
been hearing is that the word vulva, right, is well, I'll give you an example. I'm banned from using that word in my house, right, from my wife,
Oh,
okay?
why?
Because this is it, right? Because my wife doesn't like the word. I'm also banned from scrotum and other words like that, right? So
Okay.
they're medical words, but I was maybe using them in a context where she wasn't she wasn't delighted about me using them, perhaps. But I'm banned from using those words, right? So talk to me just a little bit about the words, why we have such a problem with these words, and why that's causing shame and some other things to crop up.
So it goes back to, I think, well, particularly in Ireland, women never being allowed to express themselves. Particularly the Catholic Church had a huge influence on the way women and men both expressed themselves. Our bodies were shameful. We couldn't talk about our bits. We had womanly problems in inverted commas. We didn't talk about periods. We certainly didn't talk about vulvas. It was just vaginas were for sex or procreation, and that was it. And then we didn't even look after them afterwards. So I experienced in the pharmacy firsthand women coming into me with awful issues with their vulva and their vagina. And they couldn't name the words, they didn't know what the symptoms were, and they didn't know that they could get help with them because they were literally told and encouraged to just put up and shut up. They were women's problems, and that's what you dealt with. They wouldn't talk about it with their partners, with their friends. They'd hardly even admit it to themselves. So I saw this firsthand, and I saw woman after woman coming into me, particularly older women that would have been suffering for many, many years, and to the point that they couldn't sit down, they were so sore. There's a syndrome called genital urinary syndrome of the menopause. It's a massive medical mouthful, but it actually happens about 80% of women in some way, shape, or form. There's a myriad of symptoms involved. So it's anything from dry vagina, vaginal atrophy, sexual dysfunction, which means you just can't have sex. Your vagina just is too sore, you can't have sex, or it's not enjoyable, nothing get in. Urinary tract infections, pelvic organ prolapse, which is where the pelvic organs, your womb, your bladder, or your bowel, kind of bulge into the vagina because the vagina walls get a bit thinner and they're not as stable as they were, before our estrogen levels started dropping. So all of these issues, and no one was fucking talking about them. And women were suffering in silence, and their relationships were suffering too, whether they were in heterosexual relationships or homosexual relationships. Although I'm sure gay women together could maybe talk about things, maybe because it may have been happening in both of them. But certainly in straight relationships, you'd have women that wouldn't be having intimacy with their partners for many, many years, and no one was talking about it. It was affecting their self-confidence. It was affecting their ability to communicate with their partner. It was affecting their relationship and just everything. It was affecting their ability to even exercise. And we know that exercise is the best thing that we can do to keep ourselves independent when we're older. So moving our muscles now, keeping our joints strong, our bones strong and that's keeping our brain healthy too. So it's also preventative against dementia and Alzheimer's. It's the biggest tool we have in our toolkit against dementia and Alzheimer's because there's no medicines that are reverting that or helping stop it in its tracks either to date. But if women can't walk the length themselves because they're leaking, they're not going to be going lifting weights in the gym. So this all feeds into, so intimate health all feeds into women's general health and well-being. And I really noticed this when I was asked to do, so I saw this in the pharmacy and was kind of talking about it online a little bit. And then I got asked to do a series of talks when we first opened up after COVID, a series of 5 talks over a period of 5 weekends for a wellness company. And I was like, well, what do you want me to talk about? They're like, oh, just talk about women's health. And I said, well, what aspect of it? They're like, anything. So I was driving down to Athlone, which was the first hotel that they had it in. And I said, Jesus, how am I going to get these ladies' attention? You know what I mean? I could be talking about diet. and exercise till the cows come home, but they're not going to, we all know that you should be eating healthy meals, that you should be exercising, but how do I really grab their attention? So I said, I'm going to talk about sex with them and orgasms. So I went in and I stood up on the stage and said, hi, my name is Laura. I'm a pharmacist. And the 5 main pillars of health are checking yourself, diet, sleep, exercise, and orgasms. And I had the room. And I related orgasms and good sexual health back to good intimate health in general. Then I talked about incontinence. I talked about itchy anuses. I talked about all kinds of things. Yes, because women can get itchy anuses due to low estrogen levels too. And many of them think they have worms, or they think that they just put on the pseudocream and put up with it, when in actual fact a little bit of estrogen cream could help them. And no one was talking about it. And the queues of women after my talk was something I'd never seen before. So then I got bolder and bolder at each talk. I used to bring the dildos with me the next time, was flying them around, and the women loved it. I had more and more people coming up to talk to me. And then I got asked to do a number of talks kind of around the country for the big firms like Google, Microsoft, Pfizer, Amazon, all those. And one particular day, every woman that I'd spoken to in the audience, there was about 50 of them, they all were queuing to talk to me afterwards and tell me their story, because a lot of women were like, oh, I've been dealing with this for 15 years. Can't believe you just said that out loud. And, I haven't told anyone. So I went home that day to my husband and I said, oh, we need to do a show. And we're going to call it Viva la Vulva, because we need it to actually explain what it's about and actually get rid of this shame. And my husband was like, oh my God, Laura, like, I've gone with absolutely everything and all your suggestions to date, but this could be a bit racy. And I went, well, it's either going to work or it's not, and we'll find out pretty quickly. But sure, I put on 3 shows. The Galway ladies were fucking nuts. They were deadly. So that was a great start, because they were just up for it. So Galway, Tralee in County Kerry, and Cork, we sold out of them. And then I was like, you know what, I might bring it to the National Concert Hall. I'll see if they have an appetite for it. Phoned up the National Concert Hall, talked to the amazing Catherine in there. And I said, Catherine, it's Laura my name's Laura Dowling, and I'd love to bring a show that I'm doing around the country to the National Concert Hall. She goes, oh, I know you, I follow you. And she goes, is the show going to be called what you currently call it? I said, well, I don't really want to renege on that, because that's the USP. And she goes, okay, I'll see what I can do. And it happened. And then, like, the rest is history, because we were just, I've just done a matinee and an evening show there. So 2,400 women, over the course of a Saturday, listening to talks about their vulvas, their vaginas, their incontinence, but all done wrapped in a really humorous way, because like dry fannies are not fun to talk about. But if you make a bit of a laugh about
They
them,
are.
if you make a bit of a laugh about them, and you make people remember them, and you reduce that shame. So the reason why I say words are so important is, if someone can articulate that part of their body and articulate the fact that the real, of course you can call it any kind of pet name that you want, but if you know the real name of it, and you know where all the little bits are, your labia, your clitoris, all that, you can then, that gets rid away of some of the shame in the first instance. Then you're more likely to go and ask for help. You're more likely to, if you've looked at it in a mirror, when it's, if the skin's changed or anything like that, you can detect cancer. It's like, the way I see it is, and actually Tommy Tiernan did say, like, oh, I don't really like the words, himself. And I said, well, like, there's no pet name for elbow, and there's no funny name for nose. So why can't we name our genitalia the way that they should be named? And that therein lies the issue, that we actually have this hang up.
But, right,
Yes.
you're a world-class marketer, right? And the reason I say that is because, yes, these words are totally normal, right? But it is very funny and eye-catching to say it, right? And not only is it funny and eye-catching, but it's not wrong, like you couldn't have put the C word, like, love your C word on this, right? But you can put this, because it is a normal word. And why shouldn't it be normal? And why shouldn't it be out there? But in a sense, that's what kind of creates the magic of this whole thing that you're doing, in a way, right? And you're kind of, you're balancing advice. Like, you got very serious there for a moment when you're talking about women coming into the pharmacy and, how passionate you are about these issues. But there's a kind of an entertaining way that you're expressing it. So I don't know if I have a question as such, but would you agree that there's kind of something a little bit taboo about it, which kind of
Yes,
creates this
of
whole.
course. Yeah, that's what creates it. That's why I called it Viva La Vulva instead of just like women's intimate health show or another hormone show or a menopause show. Like, fucking hell, there's enough of them and they're so boring sounding. Like, let's just go for it. If you're going to go for it, you're all in, yeah? And similarly with the book, because I had a bit of pushback on the name of the book because it's called Love Your Vulva. And people are like, oh my God, are people actually going to take that off the shelf in Eason's and go up to the young lad that's behind the counter and buy it? I was like, well, if they don't want to do that, then get it online and get it delivered discreetly to their home. But we live in different times and we need to break down those taboos. We do. And that's doing it. But yes, of course, that's the magic of it when you're talking about these things. It is a little bit of tongue in cheek. But actually, it's so interesting. After the Tommy Tiernan show, so it obviously exposed me to a whole new audience that probably don't follow social media or would never have heard of me. The amount of emails I got in about women in their 80s and 90s that saw that for the first time and want me to phone them just to give them a bit of advice, or like daughters and sons of women that are older, husbands of women that are older, and even like a husband saying, he wrote me in and he said, my wife is dead now, but I was crying listening to you because actually she suffered so much and neither of us knew that there was help out there and we just kind of put up with it. And she's now dead. I wish I could go back and hug her. Like, it'd make you cry, It really would. Like, I mean, women have suffered so much over the years. So much. And there's been no one advocating for them, really, when it comes to this. And it's so important that we do. It's so important we look after our older women because they've raised us. There are grannies, there are aunties, there are mothers. And for them to end up in a nursing home, getting regular urinary tract infections, dealing with awful vulval dermatitis and just being given antibiotic after antibiotic instead of maybe vaginal estrogen, which could prevent all this, is just so sad. So we need to advocate for them and then also advocate for ourselves so that when we're 80, we know what we have to do for ourselves, or our children will know that there's help for us, and they can advocate for ourselves too. But there's no taboo around it.
Has it helped? Has it helped you in business having this kind of mission, right? Because I suppose loads of people get into business for many different reasons. Has it helped you in terms of hiring, technical things like that, but kind of growing a culture? Has it helped you having that kind of North Star, if you like?
As in, has it helped people buy into it, or has it helped me with my vision?
Well, I think either. I suppose you have that vision,
Yeah.
right? But what you might be aware of this or not, but some companies, they start, but they don't really have a North Star or kind of something they're going to outside of let's make loads of money and have some fun in
Yeah.
the meantime, or whatever it might be. And I'm kind of wondering, is the kind of higher purpose, has that sort of helped you on your journey?
Yeah, I think so, because I have been asked, like, why are you doing this? And even, people very close to me have said that. What's your end goal, Laura? Are you building a business to sell it? Are you building to get, investment and go global? And when people ask me those kinds of questions, I'm like, I don't know. It's all happened so organically. That hasn't really been the mission. Of course, it's great to be able to earn a living from what you love doing. But I think that the mission to educate and to have fun with it and to bring something to the market in the supplements that actually really work, that really benefit people, and then also to have that people love to feel seen and heard. And I know a lot of people talk about community, but I think particularly nowadays, and we've all seen with with AI and that, you don't know what you're looking at sometimes. And I think that people do want to feel that they can relate to someone and relate to a higher purpose or relate to a brand. And it's not just a brand. It's not just Coke, or it's not just, so it's something that they feel that they're a part of, but also that's probably doing a little bit of good in the world. So that's, yeah, I think it has helped because I don't, I'm not building the business to sell it. I'm not thinking about finances next year. I'm not thinking about all of that. I'd love to get it into the UK. That would be really good. I suppose that's just one thing that I'd love to do, but maybe, and this could happen, if I want to get into the UK, I'll be like, oh God, right, well, actually now we need to take it somewhere else. Because I suppose with that ADHD busy brain, you're always, you get somewhere and you're like, oh, well, but look at this over here. I'm going to do this. So there's a squirrel running across the the ceiling. So yeah. So, but I think having that North Star is important. Like, it is always good to have a sense of purpose for what you're doing, because then at the end of the day, if you're doing some little bit of good and helping people, that's half the battle, isn't it?
When what came first? So you were working in the pharmacy. Did the kind of talks come first, and then the Instagram, or was it Instagram talks?
Instagram then talks, because people were watching me on Instagram and then they were asking me to do the talks. So that's how that happened. But prior to all that, the R&D and on the supplements were going on in the background, say. But yeah, so it was Instagram then led me to talks. And even though I'd known fundamentally in my heart that women were not being educated about their bodies, and there was a real dearth of information, and doctors didn't even know what to do, and women were being prescribed antidepressants instead of HRT, it really wasn't until I went out and did those talks and saw that women were like really interested in this information and really wanted it. I was like, all right, now I know, now I'm on to something here. And then obviously with the shows selling out so quickly and the interest there, I thought, well, not everyone can come to a show, so why don't I write a book? So that's where the book came from. So everything's happened from something previously, but I suppose that's natural. Not that naturally happens in business. But I've had no plan at all, like literally no plan. Like, if you'd asked me 3.5 years ago if all this would have happened in 3.5 years, I would have been like, what?
Well, it's actually obvious that you had no plan, which is such a no, but it's such a, it's quite refreshing for me, because I think maybe looking back, a lot of people will kind of think about, oh, I was very intentional about X, Y, and Z. But a lot of the time when you dig into it, it wasn't really like that at all. It was kind of, I tried this, that kind of took off. And then I ended up kind of following that in that direction. Would that characterize kind of what you're talking about here? The kind of,
Yeah,
how
I
it
think
all.
so. And even so, I forgot to mention my podcast. So my podcast came about by the fact that with Instagram, you do a live on Instagram with maybe a doctor or another healthcare professional, and you might get a couple of hundred views on that live, and then you used to be able to save lives, now you can, but you could never really get into a really good conversation. People had to watch it at the time, or they had to be walking around with their phone on them. So then we decided that well, first of all, I didn't want to be completely dependent on Instagram for my business or my profile. So we said we'd do our own podcast. We'd build, we'd build that out. We'd invite, and I was like, well, I mean, who am I going to invite on? But you invite people on. People are happy to talk about their life, particularly people in the healthcare space, which is what I started the podcast on. Now I'm just talking to anyone who has a story, business people, politicians, but it does kind of tend to focus on health and wellness. So that was my way of not being completely reliant on Instagram for my profile building, and then also being able to get into the deeper conversations. So with Instagram, like, the drop off rate after 30 seconds is huge. So they really want just really high level, quick reels that grab people in the first 3 seconds. Like, you can't get the information across. And particularly as a healthcare professional, you want to get, when I started out, I was doing these 10-minute long videos talking about these drugs and every single side effect someone could possibly get. And sure, the drop off rate was huge. So then I realized actually people just want the quick information there. So if I wanted to have these deeper conversations, because obviously my mind is very curious, I'd have to have the experts on. So then we had long form podcasts as a result of that. And even going out and doing those podcasts, people were saying to me, stick to 30 minutes, don't put your name in the podcast title, really edit it down, have it short and snappy. And I was like, but sure, there's no point in doing that. If you have a cardiologist on and they're going to tell you exactly how to make your heart healthy or keep your heart healthy, and then talk a little bit about how they got into that space in the first instance, that's a 2-hour podcast. Why would you cut any of it out? If people want to listen to that and they're all in, they can do it, and they can do it over a course of time. I listen to long form podcasts all the time, and I just stop and start them, if I'm driving in the car, going on a long drive. So
I think there are kind of general rules that people have in their heads for some reason about
yeah,
things like podcasts and format and this kind of thing. And ultimately, I just think as soon as you stop worrying about all that stuff, it
yeah,
just becomes
just
so much
do
easier.
you. It's like people, when I was in the pharmacy first doing Instagram and dancing in the pharmacy and stuff, and I know people have been like, if I'd asked for permission to do that from my bosses, I would have been told no. So I kind of just prefer to ask for forgiveness. But the thing is that brought people into the pharmacy, and, they saw that. And, but yeah, if you'd asked, is it a good idea for a pharmacist to start dancing in the dispensary or to start having a bit of a laugh with her staff in the shop on a day-to-day basis and showing what, went on in the pharmacy, people may have said, that's not a great idea. But I just did it. So, and I didn't really think about it. Now, and that's not to say that sometimes I'll do a post and I'll, close my eyes and my stomach will churn when I press post, because sometimes you have to be a bit, not deliberately controversial, but you're going to piss some people off. But I'd hate to be, I don't like to be that, and I know you should be doing the hook and getting people in, but I don't like to scare people either. So there's a fine line between doing a good hook that gets people interested quickly than like scaring people like, you're going to die. People will be like, yeah. So the healthcare professional, the pharmacist hat is always on in that instance. I need to be ethical and give ethical, unbiased advice always, and while still trying to get those views.
If I was looking at you now, and from an outsider, I was like, okay, I want to do what Laura Dowling does. Wow, that looks amazing. I think that would just be impossible. Like what you're doing and what you've kind of done isn't really. I couldn't take any of that stuff and put it over here, right? Let's say I wanted to put it in a kind of story format. You might say, you started with an audience. Okay, great. I now just need to grow an audience, right? But the way you've grown your audience has been so natural, and so that's, you've just done it by being Laura in a lot of ways. So you haven't been very strategic about it. So it would be too hard to kind of replicate anything that you've done. And I can see you kind of looking at me like, where is he going with this? And I'm not actually quite sure I know myself. But when I'm sitting across from people here, I'm trying to kind of think about what are the things I can take from this for the audience that they might be able to kind of take into their own lives and into their own businesses and kind of help out. And with you, it's such an incredibly interesting story, but I'm not sure it's replicable at all,
Really? I think it is.
Okay, well, tell me.
Yeah, I just think you need to be yourself and not be worrying about what other people think, because generally they're not even thinking about you. So there's that. I think we worry a little bit too much about what people think. We're afraid to fail. Like I told you, I failed in 2017, and it was absolutely, it's terrible, because I was like, oh my goodness, all this work that I've done, I have this pharmacist brain, I've got these great formulas, but I don't know how to bring it to market, or it's not going to work out. Or I'm going to lose my house in the first week. Do you know, that kind of way? I think being true to yourself, I think that understanding that there's room for everyone at the table. I think sometimes we think that we have to gatekeep and we have to keep it, we can't possibly tell another founder of a supplement business that this is the way we do it because they are going to copy us. But everyone's different, and your audience will relate to you. People that will relate to you may not relate to me. And it's like that saying, what, there's a shoe for every foot. I think if you find your niche, you have it. And you don't need 100% of the people to like it. You don't even need 80% of the people to like it. You need 20%. So if you have a loyal customer base or client base or follower base that actively engage with you and just grow it that way and give them what they want. So I learn every day what my followers want from me, and by default, the women that I'm trying to reach and the men that I'm trying to reach too now. I get regular feedback. I do polls online. I do so, and this is actually probably a good story. So I remember bringing my idea to a well-known college, say professor, right? A business college in Dublin. I'm not going to say the name. But anyway, I asked him to come for coffee with me and I explained to him that I wanted to bring out a supplement for women for the menopause. This was 10 years ago, right? And I remember him saying, so I could see that people were willing to buy supplements. I could see that they were interested in them, but I could see they were utterly confused by them. And I remember him saying to me, okay, so where's your market research? How do you know that people want this? And then what's your turnover in your current job for these supplements? And I knew none of those answers. And he kind of ran me and said, well, like, you don't really know what you're talking about then. But I fucking knew in my gut. And I think sometimes you have to just know in your gut and believe in yourself. Like, I wouldn't have even thought to download the reports. All I knew is I could see people buying supplements on a day-to-day basis, and I could see the confusion as well with them too. So I knew that there was something there. But yeah, so I think that sometimes when you go to maybe someone that's maybe a professor in business, and obviously they have a formula because they're academics and they understand and know how things should go to plan. But then I think that probably the vast majority of entrepreneurs just go with their gut and they do something completely out of the ordinary, and that's why it works. So yeah, so I'd say people can learn from me by, don't be afraid to fail, don't be afraid to be yourself, don't be afraid to do something daft, don't be afraid to, potentially fall on your face because it can actually turn out the other way, which, like the Viva La Vulva shows, they could they could go like that's another business in and of itself, those shows, and have brought the book and have actually subsequently brought the intimate wellness products too. So that's like almost a separate business to the supplement business. So by being myself, I've opened the world and opened the universe to, I suppose, um, embrace me, really. Isn't that kind of what it's about? I think it's about just being open to everything and taking lots on board. I listen to a lot of podcasts as well. I listen to a lot of founder podcasts and a lot of business podcasts now too, and economic podcasts, which I never would have done before. But I find them really interesting listening to other people's stories.
Tell me about the show and well, what the content of the show, because it's
It's wild. You should come to the one the next time.
I would love to
Well,
go.
we've one in Cork, but we'll be doing one we'll definitely do another one in Dublin. So you can come, and your wife might actually then start using the word vulva.
Yes. Well, she
Yeah.
might allow me to use it.
She might allow you to use it. Do you have a daughter or a son?
A son.
A son, okay. Well, once you have a little girl, it's so important that she's shown context. But also, boys should know too. Like my boys know everything they need to know. They probably know too much. They're mortified by me, but that's another podcast entirely. I'm sure they'll be sitting there from their psychologist or psychiatrist one day going, "Oh, my mother did this, and that's the reason why I'm so fucked up." But anyway, so the content of the show has evolved over the years. So obviously, we went down to Galway for our first show, not having our rashers what was going to happen. So myself being like I was fronting it, obviously the host and kind of selling it. I asked my friend, a pelvic floor physiotherapist, Aoife Harvey. Jen Rock came on board as a skincare specialist with her own story about her own endometriosis and hysterectomy and all the kinds of things that she had to happen. I got Kyla Cobbler on board. This is before Kyla actually exploded. I was like, yes, I got her before she went nuts. We had her, and then I had a sex therapist on board too. So I think for the first two shows we had Grace Alice O'Shea, and then we had another lady then, Dr. Caroline West, for the subsequent two shows. We had Shauna, she owns a sex shop. And I went down, we had no prep, and we were like, okay, I'll go for half an hour, then Aoife go for half an hour, then, we just do it. And it was wild. And it was a sit-down dinner style event, and there was booze at the back of the room as well. So, and it was the 14th of January, so the women of Galway just wanted to come out and have fun. So half of them were lamped, and then the other half were sitting there really wanting to listen. So that was a bit of a tricky one, because some of them were just there for the fun of it, and then others really, really wanted to learn. So we replicated that in Tralee and then Cork, and then we thought actually it would be better if they couldn't drink so much, maybe, so that they could actually sit and listen auditorium style, which is why we decided to take it to the National Concert Hall. Because I think sometimes when people get really rowdy and, there's a bit of drink on board, although it's wonderful and they can have a bit of crack, the people that are there to learn can feel like as if they've missed out. And also it can be difficult for the speakers. Like I remember us standing there on stage and there'd be people like having a full-blown conversation at a table just beside you, and you're like, will you shut up, girls, I'll never forget Kyla having to go up in Cork. She had to come up to one table and go, shut up, they're talking at the front, that kind of way. So then that's why the auditorium worked really well. So in the National Concert Hall shows, people can have a drink beforehand, but they can't bring a drink into the auditorium, and they can't get up and down to the bar. So that just made it a little bit more streamlined and fluid. So we totally went all out in the last two. We had the double gospel choir. We've always had a drag act. We had the drag act. we had Deirdre O'Kane this time. So
I saw a clip actually of Deirdre O'Kane. Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And your sister dresses
My
up.
sister dresses up. Well, she dresses up as a vulva usually. She also dresses up as a poo, as a kiwi, as a gym bunny. You know, it's to show women what they can do to help themselves, because a lot of women don't know that, you know, if they're constipated, that can actually aggravate a prolapse. They need to be eating kiwis. So we try and show them in a really fun way how they can mind themselves. And then we had a sex therapist on this time as well. Her name is Emily Power Smith. She was fantastic. She came in with a dildo the size of this mic. And if anyone's listening, the size of the mic is about a foot. Now, it's not a dildo that was to be inserted. It actually was originally made as a neck massager. And she said in the 1950s, the women in the 1950s were very industrious. And they realised that if this neck massager was applied to their vulva, it could actually cause an orgasm. So anyway, that she had everyone in stitches. We discussed all things lube, all things, you know, what women can do to help themselves from a self-pleasure point of view to an intimacy with a partner point of view. And women just love it. They absolutely love it. And it's a really safe space. And then we have confessions at the end, because my Sunday confessions on Instagram are notorious. People just write in all this random stuff and I put it up. You know, I moderate it obviously because there's some things I just can't put up. But we had live confessions as well. So we had this app called Slido, so people could like put in this confession. It just pops up on the screen, and then Deirdre O'Kane and I were discussing the confession. So that was fun too. So yeah, it's iterated, and Cork's going to be different again. So
as you're talking about it, you see, you're very kind of animated.
I love it.
Yeah, you love it,
I love
right?
it, yeah.
Is this your favorite part of the business?
I do love that. I really do. I do love entertaining and making people laugh. And making people laugh about a subject that they probably would have been, would have been a bit taboo and probably would have affected them negatively. So I love that part of it. I love that part of it. But equally so, I kind of love doing my little videos online as well and seeing the feedback from them. What do I like the least? The stuff that I like the least, I give my husband to do, actually.
Excellent.
Yeah.
As the
So it's like a
ADHD,
win-win.
yeah.
It's like literally like a win-win. Yeah.
Now that now that all this has happened, if you like, because I suppose you've gotten there from kind of being yourself, right, as we talked about. Now that it's all happened and you were a finalist in the EY Entrepreneur of the Year program, I suppose before it all happened, you know, you talk to a professor and he says, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. And then you kind of do it in your own way, in your own kind of, in a much better, kind of more expressive way. Now, do you look at other things like finance or like things that maybe might have bored you previously and kind of apply it to what you're doing? Or do you kind of still not really think about it?
Well, no, like we run meta ads. So obviously I look at the breakdown on how our meta ads are doing and the CAC and the customer acquisition cost and the, you know, the ROI, which is return on investment. So all that stuff I would have not known a rash about. Like I literally launched this business from my couch and we weren't running paid ads for the first year, I'd say, year or two even. So all of that is interesting. So it's interesting to see what moves the needle. It's interesting to see what ad works. But now with AI and with Meta, they've changed the whole way that you would make a video for an ad. So it used to be if you had one video, you tried three different hooks and decide which one is the best and put all your paid spend behind that. But now Meta will actually look at that one video with the three different hooks as one video, a separate video. So if it's not doing well, they just push it down the algorithm. So now you have to come up with different videos all the time and different concepts all the time. So we now have, I think, in the next month or two, are going to take a creative agency from the UK on board to help us to kind of with that in the UK, because we are finding it difficult to help to make the content that works in Ireland translate over to the UK. You have to remember Irish accents may not work over there. We express ourselves differently. You know, even I said something like the other day, I was doing a live with Nadia Swahala, who is one of the ladies from Youth Women, and I said something like, oh, she can't walk the length of herself, how can she exercise? And she goes, what was that expression there? Can't walk the length themselves? I've never heard that. Or when we say grand, they say wonderful. So all of those things, you know, you're not talking to, if you're talking to an Irish person, they get it, or they might get the humour, whereas a British person might just see it that bit differently. So we need a bit of guidance there. So that's why we've taken a creative agency on board to help us with that.
And the stuff you kind of don't like, right? Is it as simple as I just outsource that to my husband, or I give it to someone else, and you don't really spend too much time?
Yes, so I don't even answer emails. Yeah. I can't. Like, I couldn't possibly do everything. And look, sometimes I have to do really annoying things like book a hospital appointment for my son or something like that, which I
Yeah.
had to do yesterday.
Oh.
Oh my gosh. To book an MRI scan. Oh, it's so funny what the jobs that I see as boring or as laborious are other people fly through. Like answering emails to me is literally like I will put it off to the last minute and it will take so much mental energy. But ask me to go on stage in front of 1,200 women and like perform for 3 hours and I can do that. So it's just about understanding how your brain works. But yeah, I outsource all the shite I don't like. Like even the podcast kind of calendar. I've a girl in like a girl working full time on, you know, the podcast calendar, the reels, all of those things that have to work that way because I like looking at the reels and editing them and saying like take this out, take that in, whatever. But in terms of like the scheduling and stuff, I just, oh my God, just like allergic.
And what about hiring? Because there's some stuff I think in business that would scare people, and you're just like, I just get someone else to do it, right? But some people are like, oh, I'm not good. I couldn't do the marketing side, or I couldn't do the finances, so I'd be a little bit scared. Tell me about let's say hiring, which is kind of tends to be scary for some people, for a lot of people. Like how do you do that? Is it kind of I just see if I like them and if they can do the job?
Yeah, so we've had some really great hires and equally we've had some not so great hires. And I think the thing about hiring people is figuring out the good ones from the ones that aren't necessarily going to work well in your business. And it doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It just means that they just don't fit. And it's like a relationship. Some people just don't get on. And so what I have tended to do is I've hired people and kind of let them find their own way in the business. So I would never have had a job spec up until very recently. I would just take people in and see where they fit and let them kind of find their way. Obviously, they have day-to-day jobs, but if they excel at something, we kind of push them into that direction. So interestingly enough, I used to go to a hairdresser. I still go to them, but one of the girls that worked in the hairdresser was one of the guy who owned the hairdresser's daughter. And she was washing hair in the hairdressers. But my colourist said to me, oh, you should look at Connie's videos on YouTube. And Connie is an amazing lady. She was only 21 at the time, my goodness. And she was doing this drag dress up where she'd be taking off RuPaul's Drag Race. And she was like lip syncing it, doing the whole thing. And her videos were excellent. And I remember thinking, Jesus, I need her to help me with content. So I just said to her, hey, do you want a job in my business? And she goes, okay. Like, okay. And she ended up being the best hire we've ever had. Now, unfortunately, herself and her girlfriend have headed off to Asia now for 3 months. But she worked in the business with us for 3 years and she was brilliant. And she initially started with content and helping us pack products to content to then she was working full time on the website, getting it optimized, working with our website developers. So that shows you someone who just is able to, I suppose, find her way in the business themselves. And then other people, I suppose, we've hired and they've had a certain particular job to do and they've done that job, but then they actually, it works out, it turns out that they're better at another job. So we try and find that way for them. But yeah, hiring, is it scary? It's more that it's a pain in the arse because you have to like sit through, 10 Zoom meetings with people. And, so like sometimes, within 2 minutes whether or not they're going to work or not. And I suppose it's going through those CVs too. But the right people are very important. And I think that if someone isn't working out, it's good just to nip it in the bud quickly. Because I worked in a big pharmacy chain. And if someone isn't working out, they can just, the negative, and it could just be because it just doesn't suit them. They can be a very lovely person and a very hard worker, but it just doesn't suit them. But if someone is negative on the team, it spreads and it's not great for the team. So I suppose it's by having those conversations. And sometimes someone can turn around as well. Sometimes they just don't know. You just need to say it to them. Particularly, I think people that went through COVID, maybe at the age of 18, 19, and they were in their rooms basically. They didn't get their Leaving Cert done. And they didn't maybe have the first couple of years in college that we had to, absolutely make a show of ourselves. And they maybe don't know how to communicate as well. So I would find, say, younger people these days, they're never really good at answering the phone. So from the very get-go, I say, if I ring you, answer it. Don't send me a text back going, what do you want? That would drive me crazy. I'm not a texting type of person. I'm like, give me a ring and we'll sort it out. So I think sometimes younger people, they just haven't grown up with a phone. So even my own children, you know, I would be talking to one of them on the phone. I remember like I'd be talking to him on the phone and then he'd just hang up on me. And I phone him, I goes, he didn't say goodbye. He goes, but I thought the conversation was over. I'm like, this isn't texting, sweet cheeks. Yeah, there's a bit of manners and decorum required. So I always sit the young people down that I hire and say, listen, I'm going to phone you. Don't get scared. It's not that there's something wrong, because I think it's almost like they're afraid, or they're afraid they won't have the answer. I'm like, great if you don't have the answer. And I always say to them as well, I want you to make mistakes because you will learn from the mistakes. And actually, the more mistakes you learn, the more mistakes you make, the more we learn. So don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid of speaking up in a meeting. Don't be afraid of saying something stupid. Nothing's stupid. Everything's valid. But pick up the fucking phone.
Do you ever have a head in the hands moment, or have you had them over the course? Because I think a lot of people who I sit across from here will just have had these moments where they just thought, this isn't going to work. I'm not going. But I think you're very different to a lot of these people because it sort of happened so organically, right? And you're so.
I've had my moments.
Yeah.
So that's another podcast entirely. That's how I failed and had many sleepless nights and still managed to do it podcast. Yeah, look, we all have them. We all have these awful days where we've gone, oh my God, what am I doing? And actually sometimes late at night when I'm very tired, I go, God, why am I doing this? I'm so tired. Am I really, and I think sometimes when you're tired, you just can't make proper decisions. That's why we need our sleep. It's so important. But yeah, no, we've all had those. And I would hate if anyone thought that this was all plain sailing for me, because it absolutely hasn't been. And I've lost money along the way too. And you just have to kind of go, that's it, and you put it to one side and you get back up again and you do it and you just stay true to yourself. And also ask for help. So many people willing to help you and give you advice. Like for instance, that EOI alumni group that I'm on now, because I was on Entrepreneur of the Year, like I put in a request there I don't know, a couple weeks ago about oh look, I need a content agency. Does anyone have any ideas? And like the amount of people that message me back going, look, I've used this person, or I haven't used this person, maybe you should try this person. So people are willing to help in business. And I think people need to understand that, particularly women, because we don't grow up. We don't, we don't grow up on a rugby team or a GAA team generally understanding that teamwork actually really matters, and women can be afraid to reach out to each other and to others. Whereas men kind of learn it from the get-go. They learn, I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine. We need to be told that almost. I remember being afraid to ask another woman or a man to help me. I used to think that if you wanted to get a bit of advice or have a chat with someone, you had to pay them for their time if you asked them for a coffee. But now I know that like people are so willing to have a chat with you, and I'm willing to have a chat with people and help people out too. And it's kind of like what goes around comes around, and that whole pay it forward type of thing.
It's interesting that you talk about the difference between men and women there, because for me, a lot of the time, a woman's business story can be a bit more interesting because they've had to battle things like what's that called, where imposter syndrome, just that little bit more than a man would have, is what I find anyway. And it just, well, their pain is my pleasure here in the podcast in a way, because it just makes for a better story, right? But it makes it more interesting along the way.
It does. And it's interesting that you say that about imposter syndrome, because obviously I do a podcast. So I've done, I don't know how many podcasts now, maybe over 200, and we've had men and women on the podcast. And I always say to people on the podcast, before we sit down, we have a cup of tea beforehand and a little chat. And I always say to them, listen, this is a really open and honest conversation. I want you to be as comfortable as you can. And if you want anything out afterwards, there's no problem. You can take it out. So don't be worried and don't hold back on me. Just let it flow. And if you want to listen to it afterwards or you want to take stuff out, that's fine. None of the men have ever asked me to take anything out. And, we finish the podcast and I say, so was that okay for you? Yeah, great, grand, just let me know when it's out. But women tend to go, oh, can I listen back to that and just see if I was okay? And I'll absolutely send them the files. And more often than not, they'll listen back to it and they'll go, actually, it's fine. But they have the doubt, or else they may want something out. And that's fine. We take stuff out, particularly if it's like around statistics they may have felt that actually weren't right or something like that. So it's interesting, that imposter syndrome. And even with the EOI thing, I remember I did a podcast with Anne Herity and Eamon McCram. They were saying it's more difficult to get women into the EOI program because they always feel they have to have all their ducks in a row before they'll enter. Whereas men are like, oh, sure, I'm great, I'll just do it anyway, that kind of way. So yeah, so I think that girls learn to hold back. They're maybe taught to hold back a little bit more, which I think then is the reason why we should be talking to them about their bodies, using the proper bits. It comes back to all of that, giving them the bodily autonomy and the self-confidence to know that they are valid and important and just as much right to be at the table as the man beside them and as the boy beside them. Yeah, so I really do believe that.
Absolutely. Laura Dowling, it's been a pleasure having you in. And I'm delighted that you came in, because even when you were saying I've learned to say no to things, I was like, I'm delighted I got in before then if she's saying no to things, because this little podcast wouldn't be on the radar. But thank you very
Well, I was
much.
delighted to come in and talk to you.
I'd like to finish with, you've dedicated your book to a number of people, and you mentioned your mother already, but you said here, to my mum, who always told me I could be anything I wanted so long as I was kind. Could you just talk to me a little bit about that and maybe what you learned from your mother?
So mum has always told me she's always told all of us, there's 4 of us, 2 boys and 2 girls, you can be whatever you want. You can absolutely just chase your dreams. She was always very much, education is very important. It's important to go to school and do your exams. You don't necessarily have to get all A's, but just study, and education was very important to her. And she was always very much a confidence booster. So you could, sometimes I feel, you could just eat your dinner and mum would be like, yay, you ate your dinner. She's that type of mum. But she always encouraged us to do whatever we wanted and chase our dreams. But she always, always said, it's so important to be kind. Be a kind person. Be a good person. Give back. And, that has followed me through life. And being kind doesn't necessarily mean giving material items away to people, although that is lovely. Being kind is as much as acknowledging someone on the street, giving a smile, thanking the bus driver when you get off the bus. That kind of thing has a little butterfly effect and can change people's lives. Like, it really can. And even the conversations I would have had with people in the pharmacy, being kind to them, listening to them. And yeah, like, it's just so important. Mum is a brilliant woman.
It's so true, because I think, and what you said about the butterfly effect, like, I can remember moments when people were kind to me, even though they're not even, it wasn't like I was the bottom of the barrel and someone was kind to me. It was just general kindnesses.
Yeah.
For some reason, I remember them
Of
more
course
so.
you do. Of course you do. And they can be the difference in someone's day, being kind to them, giving them a smile on the street, having a little chat with them. It really can. It can make a difference. And I just think it's so very important, because particularly in this day and age, I think with the social media, it's almost taught like dog eat dog and everyone needs to be this way or whatever. But kindness goes a really long way. And you don't have to do this mad gesture of that everyone needs to know about for a greater cause. It can literally just be the people that you are involved with every single day of your life. If you try and be a little bit kinder to them and talk to them with respect, then it goes a long way.
I think that's a great point to finish on. Laura Dowling, thank you very much for joining me. I've really enjoyed I knew I would, because I've read the book and all of that, but thank you so much for coming in. It's been
I
great.
didn't think I could talk so long about myself.
It was excellent. Thank you
Okay,
so much.
thanks a million.